We now have confirmation that Donald's advisors did in fact share classified military details about the Yemen strikes, which we all knew, despite days of denial and denials from every level of the administration. But I want to start with the man who accidentally invited a journalist into the signal thread where this all unfolded. National Security Advisor Mike Waltz. Last night, he went on Laura Ingraham's show to do damage control, and because, like Donald, he's a complete idiot, he only made things worse.
I can tell you for 100%, I don't know this guy. I know him by his horrible reputation, and he really is the bottom scum of journalists. And I know him in the sense that he hates the president, but I don't text him. He wasn't on my phone, and we're going to figure out how this happened.
So you don't. Oh, well, I don't know him, but I hate him. Sure, good for you. But how exactly does that explain the, quote, he wasn't on your phone part, unquote? How did he end up on the chain, Mike?
So you don't know what staffer is responsible for this right now?
Well, look, a staffer wasn't responsible, and look, I take full responsibility. I built the group. My job is to make sure everything's coordinated.
But how did the number? I mean, I don't mean to be pedantic here, but how did the number?
Have you ever had somebody's contact that shows their name, and then you have somebody else's number there?
I never make those mistakes.
Right? You got somebody else's number on someone else's contact. So of course I didn't see this loser in the group. It looked like someone else. Now, whether he did it deliberately or it happened in some other technical mean is something we're trying to figure out.
Wait. Oh, first of all, you called him a loser. That's got to sting. Oh my God, poor Jeffrey Goldberg. How is he going to recover? But seriously, I'm responsible. I mean, good for you for not throwing your staffers under the bus, but who else do you seem to be throwing under the bus there? Who added him? Like, seriously, that sounded like a potential accusation to me. So when Ingraham presses him on the who he thought he was adding Waltz just refuses to answer.
I'm sure everybody out there has had a contact where it was said one person and then a different phone number.
But you've never talked to him before, so how's the number on your phone? I mean, I'm not an expert in any of this, but it's just curious. How's the number on your phone?
Well, if you have somebody else's contact and then somehow it gets
someone
sucked
sent
in,
you that
it gets
contact.
Sucked in.
Was there someone else supposed to be on the chat that wasn't on the chat that you thought was
so
on the
the person that I thought was on there was never on there. It was this
Who
guy.
Was that? What person?
Well, I'm not. Look, okay. Laura, I take responsibility. I built the group.
Okay.
I take responsibility by taking absolutely no responsibility. Listen, who among us has not been sucked in by a contact? Because that's a thing now. Funny story. The last time I was on Signal planning a war strike, I made a similar mistake. It's true. Some contact was sucked in. I don't know what he's talking about. How can she sit there with a straight who am I kidding? It's Laura Ingraham. Of course she could sit there with a straight face because that's what she's paid for. And she was covering for him. Oh, yeah, I haven't done that. I do that all the time. These people are just so bad. And also, sometimes I just wonder, how can they even move under the weight of their just apocalyptic stupidity? So, while Waltz was owning up to the mistake by not owning up to the mistake at all, and a very, I mean, to be fair, a very veiled and muted and vague threat that somehow Jeffrey Goldberg orchestrated this whole thing. The rest of the White House, not surprisingly, was doing much the same, denying what we have known all along to be true, that there was indeed classified information discussed in the text thread. Take a look.
Senator, I can attest to the fact that there were no classified or intelligence equities that were included in that chat group at any time.
So,
and I
so
defer,
the attack sequencing and timing and weapons and targets you don't consider should have been classified?
I defer to the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council on that question. There was no classified material that was shared in that.
So then if there was no classified material, share it with the committee.
Well, the information was not classified.
The Secretary of Defense is the original classification authority for determining whether something's classified or not. And as I've understood from media reports, the Secretary of Defense has said the information was not classified.
There was no classified information, as I understand it. They used a a app, if you want to call it an app. We always want to use the best technology. This was the best technology for the moment. But again, it wasn't classified, so they probably viewed it as being something that wasn't that important. It wasn't classified information, so this was not classified. Now, if it's classified information, it's probably a little bit different.
Okay, there's so much to talk about there, but let's start with the low-hanging fruit. Donald, because he's an idiot. All right. It's an app if you want to call it an app. Well, we call it an app because it's an app. He probably thinks it means appetizer or hors d'oeuvre. He wouldn't call it an hors d'oeuvre because he probably doesn't know what an hors d'oeuvre is either. Okay, so also remember, this is a guy who thinks he can declassify things in his little head. So maybe that's what's going on for him. But then we have the director of national intelligence saying she doesn't know something. She has to defer to the people, and she's their boss. You don't, she's the one who's supposed to know. Pete Hegseth is her employee. He reports to her. How could he possibly know something she doesn't know? Well, I know why, because she does know. You know what she just did there? Our director of national intelligence, Putin's girlfriend, as she is classified by, and I don't mean classified as in classified material, but described by Russian media. Putin's girlfriend just perjured herself in front of Congress. That's problematic. And yet, The Atlantic just proved that all of this is a lie. Now, before we dive in further, please take a second to like and share this video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. That way, you will be able to catch up on all of the latest news with us. All right, so this morning, The Atlantic released the full Signal thread, to which I say thank you so very much to The Atlantic, because that happens to be unusual in the current media environment. People who have that kind of incendiary, seriously, incredibly serious information sometimes wait a year or two to publish it in a book when it is no longer useful to us. So that is awesome and extraordinarily helpful. It gives us insight into exactly what happened here. So let's walk through together what it shows. On Thursday, March 13th, Mike Waltz creates the chat group entitled Houthi PC Small Group and asks for agency points of contact for the next 72 hours of planning. Quote, team, establishing a principals group for coordinating on Houthis. My deputy, Alex Wong, is pulling together a tiger team. God, what are they in junior high school? At deputy's agency chief of staff level, following up from the meeting in the sit room this morning for action items. Please provide the best staff POC from your team for us to coordinate with over the next couple of days and over the weekend, unquote. So some of the participants chime in: Tulsi Gabbard, Pete Hegseth, JD Vance, John Ratcliffe. Ratcliffe then shares the name of an active CIA intelligence officer on an unsecured line, which, of course, information The Atlantic redacted. Why? Why would you redact such highly sensitive information about a human intelligence officer? Well, maybe out of respect for the fact that the CIA keeps its officers' names a secret, so they are not jeopardized in future overseas missions. Something Waltz doesn't seem to care about, as he put it into a Signal chat. If I were that CIA officer, I would be very, very worried right now. And I would be extraordinarily angry that these people who have such positions of power and authority put my life in danger. For what? Nothing. On Friday, March 14th, JD Vance expresses concern over the economic impact of a strike and floats the idea of delaying the mission. Hegseth replies, not with a military argument. No. Remember, he's a Fox guy, but with a PR strategy. Quote, messaging is going to be tough. Nobody knows who the Houthis are, which is why we need to stay focused on 1, Biden failed, and 2, Iran funded, unquote. Then, unbelievably, he continues, quote, we can easily pause, and if we do, I will do all we can to enforce 100% OPSEC. All right, unquote. Let's pause for a second here. So after strategizing about how to blame Biden, which is pretty much one of the only things they know how to do, Hegseth states that he will enforce OBSEC, which means operational security, a process of identifying and protecting critical information from adversaries in order to prevent the compromise of operations and maintain secrecy. That is their idea of operational security in a chat, an unsecured and absolutely disallowed by their own government chat signal that included a journalist. Then we get to the big reveal. On Saturday, March 15th at 11:44 a.m., Hegseth sends a team update. He lists minute by minute when the United States will launch F-18s, when drones will hit targets, and when the first bombs will drop. This was not generic planning. These were real-world strike times. Real-world strike times released before the operation began on signal to an unsecured and totally unvetted group, because there was somebody in that group who did not belong there, should not have been there, and they did not want there. New York Times Pentagon correspondent Helene Cooper put it very bluntly, quote, "This is where the rubber meets the road. Hegseth described operational details that could have been used to bring down those planes," unquote. Then came the damage assessment, also in the chat. 1:48 p.m. Waltz, quote, "Building collapse, had multiple positive ID. Pete Carilla, the IC, I'm assuming that means intelligence community, amazing job," unquote. Then he clarifies that, quote, "The first target, their top missile guy, we had positive ID of him walking into his girlfriend's building, and it's now collapsed," unquote. At 2:01 p.m., Vance writes back, quote, "Excellent," unquote. 30 minutes later, Mike Waltz, because apparently he's a prepubescent idiot, responds with a fist pump, a flag, and fire emojis. At 5:20 p.m., Hegseth wraps it up. Quote, "CENTCOM is on point, more strikes ongoing, full initial report tomorrow, on time, on target, and good readout so far," unquote. At 5:21 p.m., Steve Witkoff responds with a few more emojis because, what better way to celebrate bombing people than with emojis? And at 6:35 p.m., TG, who is absolutely Tulsi Gabbard, do not listen to that liar tell you otherwise, closes with, quote, "Great work in effect," unquote. These were the war plans. This is what these absolutely breathtakingly blatant liars claimed never, ever happened. All right, well, it all did happen, didn't it? So let's recap. They denied the text existed. They denied any classified information was shared. They attacked the press. And they specifically attacked Jeffrey Goldberg, who was there at their invitation, intentional or otherwise. And now they've been caught red-handed. So what's going to happen? I don't know. I think partially that depends on whether or not any of the Republicans in the Senate care enough to do something, because they all know how serious this is. They all know that every single person in a sane world that was in that chat should be fired and tried for under the Espionage Act. They all know that. So which of them, if any, is going to step forward? It also comes down to, well, what is Donald Trump going to do? I think we have some idea already. Also, it depends on what the Democrats do. This is a golden opportunity for the Democrats to take up this cause and make it clear to the American people that they and they alone care about national security for this country and for the citizens in it. So far, they're doing a good job, but they cannot let this story go, because this is huge. It continues to be huge. The ramifications of this are enormous. The repercussions of it should be devastating, especially to those miscreants, to those unqualified, treasonous hacks who were involved. But we already see what's happening at the White House. They're already trying to set up Jeffrey Goldberg. We see Waltz doing it. We see Donald doing it. We also have seen Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary, doing it. She's trying to lay the blame on Goldberg for reporting on the story, which she called a hoax, even though he was witnessing it in real time. Mike Waltz handed off an attack on Goldberg in particular and journalists in general. Donald Trump said, I happen to know the guy's a total sleazebag. The Atlantic is a failed magazine. Very blah, 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 blah. We know what they're doing here. They're trying to change the subject. And in the process, they are trying to make Jeffrey Goldberg and the media the enemy once again, so none of us will believe our lying eyes. Please take a second and like and share this video. Be awesome if you could subscribe to the channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please follow us and give the show a 5-star rating because it really does help other people find our content. Thanks.